Hey everybody, I'm live. Welcome to the stream. Cool. Let's get started. What I want to do today is I want to play a little music and I want to build an application. So, this is super small. I'm realizing that. So, I'm going to turn that up so we can see a little bit more. Cool. What I'm going to be working with is a little bit of music as well. Let's bring something up. Move this over here. Cool. Let's get rolling. Alright, let's take that. So, what I'm going to start doing, I was working on this earlier before, and I think I'd like to keep working on it with y'all watching. I think my background went away. It did. Huh. Weird. Let's try this again. Share your screen. Let's do this. Share. Let's change the sound. Done. Cool. Let's put this here. I think we're ready to go. Alrighty. Sweet. Alright. So, just put update online. I am live and building with Azure. And let people know. Watch. Cool. Let's go with it, alright? Sweet. Alright, let's start building something. So I decided today I'd like to go through Microsoft Learn. Microsoft Learn is this really great platform that you can work with. I'm going to put the URL right here in the stream so that if you want to go and try out this, you can. So let me just put this in here. Let me actually shorten it. I do. Definitely. So what I'm going to do first is I'm going to give you a quick way to get a URL and cool. So that's going to be URL for the session that we're going to work through today. Let me make it an overlay. Cool. Cool. So if you want to be able to use any of the resources I'm going to go through right now, you can. This is the URL. I've got it there at the bottom. Let's go through it. So what we're going to do is create a virtual machine in Azure. So I'm going to be going through the Windows module here in Microsoft Learn. If you don't know what Microsoft Learn is, it is a platform for you to learn about all sorts of really awesome Microsoft Azure and other products without having to necessarily pay for the training. It's all free. It's all in docs. Give it a shot. So the introduction will start right here. So the learning objectives in the module is just going to be showing people the options for virtual machines in Azure. We're going to create an Azure VM in the portal. We're going to connect to it via remote desktop, and we'll install some software on the VM. The prerequisites are some understanding of VMs and an introduction to Azure virtual machines. That is another module that you can take. It's here. So let's go to the next unit, create an Azure machine, a Windows machine. So what this platform is going to do is provide us with a couple of different scenarios about things that we can learn about. And in this particular situation, we've got a company that wants to manage video data from their traffic cameras in Azure using VMs. So they're going to want to connect with a couple different VMs. So as you can see, we're able to build on-demand VMs in the cloud using all these different types of services or operating systems. There's also different VM images. So if you want to use a particular SaaS platform that runs in your cloud on a VM image, you can do it here. So a virtual machine provides you with virtualized CPU and memory resources. It's a virtualized computer in the cloud. So now what we're going to do is choose the process of choosing the right VM or the virtual machine. We're going to size the VM, how much CPU, how much memory we're going to need. Then we're going to make a determination of the class. Do we need general computing? So there are all these different sizes. There's heavy computational tasks, large memory usage, memory caches. So if you want to run a giant memcache cluster or something like that, you can do that with all these nodes. Data storage and processing, heavy graphics rendering using things like GPUs, and then high performance computing, doing supercomputing type of functions. You can use different storage options, so like SSDs or standard SSDs. There are managed, there are unmanaged disks. Go through a lot of the documentation we have on disk and disk management. I think it'll make it easier. You can create disk images using VHDs. If you're using something like Hyper-V or VMware, you want to export disk images and bring them over, you can do that. Okay. Network communication, we're able to use virtual networks to communicate with our VMs and other portions of Azure. It's essentially a virtualized network. We're using software to define things like network infrastructure, architecture, design, subnets, you name it. So what's great about Learn is you get the ability to use sandboxes. So these sandboxes will give you some free Azure space to learn about how to build along with the content. So if we, in this case, we want to build a Windows machine, what we need to do is activate our sandbox. It's going to give us a real simple and limited Azure account that we can work with that will allow me to build our resources. So I'm kicking it off right now, and then once it's done, I'll just open it here in a new window. So I'll just kind of put that there. Our sandbox is activated. Now we get our sandbox Azure portal that we can work with. You can see I've already kind of been playing around with this, and now we're going to just follow the instructions. So the instructions really begin with right here. So we're going to start on the portal, and then we're going to create a resource. So click right there. So now from the resource, we're going to create a Windows server. So we'll just type Windows server. Okay, we've got our options. We'll click that. Great. And now we'll go ahead and click create, because we can pick the Windows Server 2019 Data Center option, the type of operating system that we're going to use, and now we want to configure our VM. So they give you some really easy and simple instructions to follow that you can just go one-to-one. So if you've never built a VM before in the cloud, you can see it tends to be fairly simple if you just follow the learn documentation. So first we'll do learn, virtual machine name, we'll give it a name. They give us the example of test-vp/vm2. And now we're going to pick a region. So now we're going to pick South Central United States. We've got all these different places across the world with data centers that we could choose from. In this case, we're going to pick the South Central US one. We're not going to be using some infrastructure redundancy right now. If we wanted to, we could create availability sets where we can create it with about a number of different VMs that are always available. If one goes down, it already gets created. These are the different images that we can use. So Windows Server 2019 Data Center with containers. So if I wanted to actually run containers from it, I could. But I just want to run the standard 2019 Data Center. I don't need the overhead of running the container version. Azure Spot Instance. What is this? Spot capacity. So a discounted rate versus the pay-as-you-go. This instance may not be completely up all the time. You know, let's go ahead and say we're just going to go ahead and say no, we're not going to be using a spot instance at the moment. Not really necessary. Okay, so let's keep going. So now we got to create a username and a password. I want to create a temp password and I want to keep it around. So one of the things I like to do in this case is I'll just open up something here. And I like to create a file called WinPass. And it's where I'm just keeping a temporary throwaway password. So I have this temporary throwaway password. So I'm going to give a username. And my username, we're just going to call it admin J, baby. Yeah. All right. Actually, let's just call it just JDestro. Let's make it easy so I won't forget it. Our password. And now we have the ability to select the inbound network port that we're going to allow in. By default, we'll be allowed to access RDP 3389. We could set it to none, and no ports will be allowed. Now we'll go to disks. So when I normally work with a Windows machine, one of the things I want to make sure I do personally is when I attach a disk in something like this, I'm not running my application on the same disk as my operating system. So in this section, we can create a data disk that's going to be for wherever our application is. So let's go ahead and click that. Cool. So now what we have is our disk created that we're going to be building. We have an encryption type where the platform will manage the encryption key. Without the encryption key, you can't decrypt any of this data. The source of the disk, the type, we're going to pick an empty disk. We don't want this to be a snapshot of an existing operating system or data files. But if I had, say, a set amount of data that I always want to have just available, maybe that's what's always on data disk 0, I could just go ahead and pick a particular snapshot and load it from there. In this case, I'm just going to say none. So now we can change the size of the disk. So we've got all these options of the disk tiers and the size of the disk, the mask throughput, and IOPS that we can have. And then you can actually customize the size of the disk. I don't need a terabyte. I only really need 256 gigs, so I'm just going to change it to that. So now I've got a 256 gig premium SSD with encryption with the name test-vp m data disk 0. And then go ahead and click OK. And that's at LUN 0. We can modify it to have read-only or write-back caching, or read-write caching if we need to worry about large amount of reads or tons and tons of read-writes that are going to be happening. All right, so let's go to read-only, go to networking, and now what we can do is set up virtual networks. It should be really useful to go ahead and isolate network traffic into different subnets. Right now, I'm just going to have a default subnet for the public IP addresses, but if I wanted to have a secondary subnet that this belongs to, and let's say the case is that I have database services that are going to be running on a secondary server, and I only want those database connections to be on a secondary subnet. I could do that. That's not a problem. And now we have network security groups. So right now we have just default. I'm going to go ahead and set it to advanced. This is the security group that we're going to create. And now these are the default rules that we're going to have set up. So I'm going to add an inbound rule. So I don't want to have RDP open to the world. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pick the port 3389. I'm going to say it should come from an IP address. And that source IP address that I want to allow RDP from is going to be just mine. I'm going to curl my IP and find out. So curl ICANN has IP.com. That's my local IP address. That's a cool little way. I think Major Hayden that works over at Rackspace put that up a while ago. That's useful. So I'm going to allow RDP from my local IP. I give it a priority where it is within the range of like the actual firewall rules, and then I can give it a name, port 3389 J home, and then I can actually give it a description of the firewall rule so that we can always know why we created the rule. So in this case is allow RDP from J's home network. We'll click add. And now we've got RDP open to the world, so let's get rid of that. I don't want this rule at all. So what I think I'm going to do is okay. So I'm going to finish creating this, and then what I'll do is I'm going to delete that rule. So let's just click OK. So we've got a public IP that's been assigned. We can't use accelerated networking, low latency, high throughput. There are only certain instances that take that. So then we can put this in a load balancing pool. I don't have a load balancer configured for it, so I can't really pick one right now. But if I wanted to use an application gateway or an Azure load balancer, I can enable it just with a check, so I can create one beforehand and then select it when I'm ready. So let's go to management. So this is where things like our backups, monitoring, boot diagnostics, all that stuff is selected to be used again. So if I want to use identity services, or if I wanted to use Azure AD to be the source of my identity service for these machines, I could use that. If I wanted this server to shut down every day at 9 p.m. or 7 p.m. or whatever, and a notification to go out by email first, I could do that. All right, let's go to advanced. So this is more about installing additional extensions for applications, so that when we are wanting to install other applications that have some previous existing relationships with Azure and Windows, that you can with just a click. So let's click an extension to install. And so these are all these different agents that you can install. So like the Azure Pipelinization, if you want to involve Azure DevOps and pipelines to deploy to your VM. Or if you want to run the Datadog agent, let's do that. So I'm going to install the Datadog agent along with my and I'm going to just click create. And so now I got to go to my API keys. So I'll go to Datadog HQ.com. I think that's the website, yeah. I'll log into my account. Let's log in with Google, I think that's where it is. So in this case, what I'm going to do is go to the Datadog configuration. I go to my team info. And then what I believe I can do here is go to, let's see. Integrations maybe? Let's see. Essentially what I need to do is get an API key, so let's see right here if it's over in this setup section. Okay, so I'm here at Agent, I'm going to Windows. So here's my license key. Just gonna pop it in there. I'm going to pick the .com, not the EU. Click OK. So now what this is going to do is actually going to install the Datadog agent in my Windows server. And then actually we can do things like add things to host groups, proximity groups, so that we can actually have servers closer at the edge together within the data center. And then there's also VM generation. So whether we want UEFI boot architecture, bigger disks, and SGX integration for confidential computing, you can enable all those things. I'm going to enable Gen 2. That's the kind of thing I believe is the right way to go. There are a few features that are missing, like Azure Disk Encryption, but I want to get advantage of some of this because we're just making a demo machine right now. So we'll review and create. Okay. So remember, it's warning me that I left my RDP open to the internet. I can go ahead and close that after. But I'll go ahead and I'll create. Now, what's going to happen is it's going to provision a Windows license. It's going to provision the instance that I need. It's going to do all the things that I need to do in order to work with my my new VM. And then along with that, it's going to install the agent for Datadog so that out of the box, if I need to, I can start getting metrics from Datadog about what's going on. So, hey, in this particular case with these sandboxes, they're really meant for just a particular use case of what you're building. In the case of Learn is showing you basically how to do all the things that I'm doing right now. So you can see here, create a disk. We create a new data disk. We create that virtual network. And then we finish and create the image. So now the case here is now when I click to continue, I'll go on to the next thing. Now the only real big difference that I did then from this particular tutorial is I installed the Datadog agent because I just kind of wanted to show you about how to take an extra step in adding additional features to the VM you're going to create. So let's put a little bit of automation into the process, and you can do a lot more automation than I did. I did this process manually, but one of the things you'll see here is that there's a template that was generated that you can download or save and reuse and build more VMs. So I'll download this template here. And this template is known as an Azure Resource Manager template. This template is essentially all the outputs of the things that I just did. And then what we can go ahead and do is go through and rebuild all these things and just iterate on some of the outputs, or I should say the inputs, what exactly it is we need. So if we want to build another VM with like basically the same exact configuration, but the only difference is we want to maybe give it a different name and give it a different region, we can do that. We can just rerun the script. Anyway, so let's go back here. We'll go to our resource groups. And the other thing that's like with this particular Sandbox subscription, it's limited. You only get so many hours of service out of it. And it pre-creates a lot of the resources and limits the ones that you can use. So in this case, this Learn resource group can only have so much go into it based on what our use cases are in Learn. So our VM's done. So let's go to resource. It's about what, 5 minutes to create, and we'll move on to the next part. So use RDP to connect to the Azure Virtual Machine. So you can use RDP, or you can use some custom scripts to connect to it. RDP is just a standard protocol in order to connect to our VM. Connecting to an Azure VM is pretty much the same as if you were connecting to any other VM or any other machine. So the thing that makes it really easy is right here we see connect. I need to connect via RDP, so I just go ahead and click RDP here. So it's gonna just basically tell you about certificates and things like that. We're not using any custom root certificates or anything like that. We're going to connect to our virtual machine using RDP. So I went here to RDP, and I could just like copy the IP and the port number, but you could also do this. You could just download the RDP file, and I have Microsoft Windows Remote Desktop installed on my Mac, so I'll just hit that RDP file, grab my Windows password, I think my computer's just going a little slow at the moment, so please give me a moment. So something's weird on remote desktop on my computer at the moment. So for some reason I can't get in. And it's got nothing to do, like RDP just won't start. Oh, there it is. Just slow as hell. Jeez. All right, so let's log in. So username jdestro, password. It's going to just validate that my certificate couldn't be validated because it's a self-signed. That's fine. We'll click continue. And so now it's going to log me into my new Windows server. Rad, right? And that was pretty fast. Getting everything ready to go. Just want to take this off screen because it went into full screen for some reason. So yeah, now we've got our Windows server online, and so what we want to start doing is watching the metrics that are going to come in from Datadog. So as the server begins to kind of start up, it's going to do all the standard things that a computer would do when it starts up, and then eventually it will start that agent. That agent will eventually start reporting data back about utilization of the server that we just built. So Windows is just going to bring up a bunch of these like standard tools that it comes with. But the thing I'm most considered with before we kind of end this portion is looking at the fact that we did install this new agent and that the agent is collecting information. So right now, I have to let's do this install. I think this is more Azure resources, like right here within Datadog. Cool. So now let's do a couple things that'll generate some little bit of load. Okay, so here's what this is. These are just like integrations. So now we can get metrics and stuff from our VMs without even installing it. So let's get this thing installed, man. So let's see, where'd that go? So there are all these different integrations that work along. So let's get this Azure one installed. So let's install integration. Okay, so you have to have a tenant ID and alright. Let's have a reader role. So let's see how we would do that. Okay, I think I know what has to happen. We don't really need this right now because we installed the agent, but it's a way to be able to glean some metrics directly from Azure rather than from the system. Right now what we're doing is just system based. So let's take a look here at the dashboards. Okay, and let's check Explorer. It's not there. I guess agent is where we start from, since I installed an agent. It's always fun to kind of click through when you install these things and just make sure you understand the way everything's working. So while we're doing that, I am going to make sure that our new computer actually has that second disk. Let's see what's going on here with Windows. Okay. Cool. Is it a watchdog that we'll start seeing? Anyway, let's get up here. We'll go to System. Let's take a look at storage. So this temporary storage is not that 256 gig extra disk that I have. This is just ephemeral storage that we get to come alongside with your VMs. Just it's part of it. What we need to do is to add storage. So if I'm right, we're going to go to the Windows Administrative Tools, and we're going to go to I believe Computer Management. You have to bear with me. I have not been a Windows admin in many years, but that's the cool part about this. So now we're going to go over here to Storage, Disk Management. And so there's that extra disk, I believe, that we mounted. Where is it? There's that 256 guy. Huh. So where's my other disk? So now let's go back to the portal actually and see where was that other disk. Did I just not create it? Okay, it's there. Oh, it's 127. Did I not create the... Oh, I didn't create a data disk. Oh, that's my bad. So here, let's get a data disk picked. Create disk. We'll do the disk name. Disk 2. Oh, wow. I'll just give it a name. Source top, we'll say none. Create. Let's build a 1 TB disk. It should be mounting it then here. So what I think we'll have to do once it's actually been added to the machine, move that out. What I am shocked is that I thought that I already built data disk, but apparently I didn't. Because I'm a big dummy. So anyway, here's this ephemeral disk I told you about, a DVD-ROM that's kind of simulated. We don't have to worry about it. So, alright, so there's our second disk. Encryption, not enabled. That's probably because I have it as a V2 VM. Alright, so let's click Save. And so now it's going to start updating the virtual disks that are attached to my VM. And then I think what can happen, there it is. So it just added that 1 TB disk. And so now what we can do, check the properties of it. Okay, I think it might be ready for us to work with, but let's give it a second and find out. So we got to initialize the disk first. And we just are going to use the GUID partition table. We're not going to use MBR. Then once we've done that, what I'm going to do is convert it to a dynamic disk. And then what we're going to want to do is create a volume. So we'll use all of the disk space in the volume available. We'll assign it a letter, the good old-fashioned letter F. We'll do an NTFS allocation unit volume label. We'll call the volume label data 2. And then what it'll do is perform a quick format. I don't want to enable file compression. I don't want to add any more load onto doing simple things. So then I'll click finish, and then what it'll do is start formatting that additional disk that we've got here. So let's see here, infrastructure to start. Actually seeing my VM yet. And let's look at processes. Let's hit Process Explorer on it, but maybe I'm wrong. But I could just look in the. I think I know what I need to do. Like I said, I haven't been really a Windows admin in a really long time, so please bear with me. Oop, accidentally closed it. Anyway, that's the long and the short of it. Of anyway, of creating a new VM for Windows in Azure. Creating one in Linux is pretty much fairly the similar type of situation. Deleting a resource is pretty easy too. In the case of our resource, just go to resource groups. I can pick my resource group if I want to delete everything. And normally when you're in a standard view, you can delete all these things on your own. You can go here, go to disk 2 if you want to delete the item, and click delete. We can't because it's just a limited version of our subscription. So that's just kind of a quick run through on using Microsoft Learn to teach you quickly how to build something like a VM. If you have any more questions, you can reach out to me. Let me make it easy for you to know where to reach out to me. Okay? So, you can reach out to me on Twitter at JDestro. Real easy. Just go ahead and contact me. On Twitter, you can use any other major way of contacting me. Also, DM, I don't care, or send me an email. It's jgord@microsoft.com. Reach out there. And finally, if you want to watch me on YouTube, it's YouTube. Whatever, I'm not even bothered. You can watch me on YouTube, where most of these streams are going to be saved as well. So that's basically it for today. We want to remind you, if you want to, very cool possibility of using Azure and not spending money as well, by looking at Azure $200 free. Let me actually type in Azure. So if you do the same, like search 200 free Azure, you can get a link if you don't have an account already to create a Azure account and get $200 worth of credit. You get all sorts of free services, 25 of them, that remain free. You'll have all this different products that you'll be able to use, like the virtual machines that we just built with. So thanks for watching. Get in touch if you want to keep learning. It's really cool sharing these little sessions with you. Just so you know, I've got a new show coming out where we're going to be a little bit more focused in these. So it's going to be one half of it will be a quick introduction, 2 minutes. You'll get it on Twitter, and then the next day will be a live Twitch show where we're going to expand on those. So you'll find out about that really, really soon. Once again, I want to say thanks for watching, and I'll catch you on the next stream.